I first want to update on the final absentee numbers. We've issued over 85,000 ballots prior to Election Day, which is a record amount for Montgomery County. The breakdown of that, we sent out over 51,000 ballots to voters across Montgomery County and to other addresses throughout the nation of their choosing. We voted over 32,000 people in person here at the Board of Elections, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the county administration for all their help and support, and I think things went very smoothly. We did have some long lines at certain times, but it was very organized and got very little complaining from the electorate, and again, I want to thank the county administration for their understanding and support throughout this process. I'm expecting approximately 71.5% turnout, which equates to about 275,000 ballots to be cast today here in Montgomery County. And of course, with issuing over 85,000 ballots, that means about 195,000 ballots will be cast throughout Montgomery County today at our polls. From a presidential election standpoint, we have received several calls this morning with the standard stuff, but in terms, again, as a presidential election, things could not be going more smoothly, and I'm very pleased to report all of our locations are open and processing voters. We are receiving reports of a very high turnout at this stage of the election day. However, I think the game plan that we have in place in terms of processing the voters are working. I have not received any report of anyone having to wait more than 20 minutes for access to their ballots. Our board members passed a policy until we get to that 20-minute wait time, we will not be issuing paper ballots. Now, we did have some confusion with paper ballots and with provisional ballots. We've addressed those, and I think all those issues are corrected and should be handled properly from this point forward. We've had the standard, we had a fire alarm issue in one polling location. We had to temporarily evacuate the poll workers. We secured the ballots. The fire department came through, determined that it was a false alarm, and we continued voting. No voters were turned away, which is always our most important concern, and that situation was handled. We have had reports throughout Montgomery County that a few machines were down here or there. Of course, we've addressed them as quickly as possible and brought them back up. And again, no voters have been turned away, and things are running very smoothly from that standpoint. I do want to caution the media and the public with two things. The first thing, today at Montgomery County Board of Elections, only provisional voting can happen. No regular voters can come down here and vote. Under Ohio law, they must go to their polling location on Election Day. So only voters who have moved and not notified the Board of Elections can vote here at the Board of Elections office. We've had about 75 provisional voters vote to this point. We're expecting probably another 75 to 100 voters to actually vote here. But it's important to note that, again, only provisional voters can vote at the Board of Elections office. I want to talk a little bit about tabulation tonight. Of course, a presidential election is our largest volume election. We will do the best we can to report the accurate results as soon as we can, but I want to emphasize that it's going to be a laborious, slow process because accuracy is the most important process of the tabulation. We are going to ensure that the results that we release are, again, accurate before the speed. And again, just very similar to 2008, it's all going to depend on how many paper ballots we receive at the precinct level of how long the count will take. Once we count one memory card or one ballot for that precinct, the report is going to show 100% tabulation for that precinct. However, I'm going to have a disclaimer on the report that all ballots are not tabulated until we issue the official final results. And I expect that to happen around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Around midnight, I should have about 95 to 98% of all ballots tabulated, and then depending again on the volume of paper ballots will be dependent on when we complete that unofficial canvass. But again, it's very important to have the accuracy over the speed. I expect to release at 7:45 our absentee total, which will include all early votes that were cast prior to Election Day, all absentee ballots that's been returned, any nursing home ballots that we went out to nursing homes and received from those voters, and then also any military ballots that have been received up to this point. At this point, we should release results for about 72,000 voters. So that's what you should expect to see around 7:45. And then depending on the lines at the close of polls, we'll start getting precincts in around the 8:20, 8:30 mark. And then we're required from the Secretary of State to issue cumulative reports every 15 minutes thereafter. So you'll see a lot of activity every 15 minutes. There's a possibility, depending on what part of the process we're in, that the totals may not change since we're having incremental reports that often. But again, by 11:30, 12 o'clock, we should have 95 to 98% of the votes tabulated, and then depending on the paper ballots, we'll complete it sometime after midnight. With that, I'll open it up for any questions the media may have.
Steve, can you address the issue? The media has been getting reports of confusion, but also there's a report that somebody got arrested at one of the polling locations. Is that true?
To my knowledge, no one has been arrested at any of the polling locations. We've had a couple reported incidents with observers. There's a lot of confusion with the rules of observers, their role at the precinct. We've identified those two situations. We've talked to those observers. At this point, they are in compliance with the rules, and I don't expect to have any further issues with those two specific situations. And at this point, since we haven't had too many other reported incidents with observers, I really don't think it's going to be a situation. We have issued a warning to those individuals, and if they are in violation of the rules thereafter, then we'll address it appropriately.
What did those observers do to get issued a warning?
They were using their cell phones, calling within the voting area. We had some voter complaints. There have been some voter intimidation complaints that it's intimidating the voters. However, we have to balance what they're allowed to do to what they're not allowed to do and ensure that the voting process is not impeded and voters are not intimidated. And that's what we're planning on doing throughout Election Day.
What do you expect, do you think, as far as final turnout? And are people going to have to be waiting in line? What do you think will be about that as the day goes on?
Well, obviously, there's always three peak voting times throughout the Election Day: before work, lunchtime, and after work. We are seeing the peak time before work. There are some lines throughout Montgomery County. I expect a larger turnout during the lunchtime hour and then also at the end of the day. Typically, we do not have long lines at the close of polls, which is at 7:30, but this is a presidential election. Voters obviously want to be very engaged in this process, so we potentially could have, but it's important to note, any voter that's in line at 7:30, when we close the polls, we will take whatever amount of time it will take to process that voter. If it's 9 o'clock till we get done with the voters, that's what we'll do. And then again, that could have an impact on the tabulation. We have to get the process back. We're a fairly large county, and we have satellite locations and different precincts to do an initial drop-off, and then they're brought down to us. Depending on if there are large lines at the end of the day, then potentially that would slow the process of tabulation down.
Do you guys have a representation more or less than 2008 as far as voters? And do you know, I know you mentioned like 70,000 early vote. Do you know what percentage you think early vote might make up of the total?
Well, we know we've issued 85,000 ballots prior to Election Day. And I'm expecting a 71.5% turnout, which equates to about 275,000 votes. And again, if you just do the basic math, that's about 27–28% of the total votes cast for this election was cast prior to Election Day.
Okay, 71.5%. What's that compared to 08 turnout?
We had I believe, a 71.9% turnout I'm expecting about 4,000 to 6,000 less people participating in this election, but that's because of loss of population. And then, of course, our voter registration rolls are more up to date than they have been in the past just because of different programs. So I think that'll impact, even though we'll have less voters, I think the turnout will be similar to 2008.
And what about provisional ballots? I mean, how many do you think you'll end up with, and where are you kind of at with that today as people start to go out to the polls and maybe have moved and, just now figure that out?
Well, I will tell you, we received approximately 2,400 provisional ballots during the early voting process, which equates to about 5 to 7% of the early vote that actually voted, and that's pretty typical of a presidential election. Election day, today I would expect somewhere between 10 to 12,000 additional provisional ballots to be cast throughout Montgomery County. Now, of course, we have to go through the 10-day canvass period to determine the eligibility of those ballots. And then when it's all said and done, I expect somewhere between 85 to 80% of them to be valid. Obviously, if there's any close races on a federal, state, or local issue, that those issues or those candidates may have to wait throughout the canvass period to determine who truly won that election. And that's pretty typical with the volume of provisional ballots.
Steve, can you also address a rumor that there were some issues going on at the VA Medical Center? You had mentioned that no voters have been turned away. Have you gotten any reports of problems out of the medical center, VA Medical Center?
The only report that I received from the VA Medical Center is a voter during our nursing home process did not request a ballot and is asking to be voted. And we're addressing that. That's not really a complaint as much as it is an oversight during the initial process that we'll correct by sending a team out to vote that person.
The places that were reporting problems, like the church we spoke of this morning, are those machines being repaired, or are they still doing paper in that location?
Well, with all machine reports, 95% of them are human error. They can be fixed through, there's a sensor, low paper. We had a situation where our poll workers did not have the surge protector turned on. And of course, the units have a battery backup, but once they've used all the battery backup power, then they shut down. And it appears on the surface it's a machine malfunction, but in fact it's simply a switch on the surge protector. And of course, those are the frustrating things that we react to because that's a very easy fix. Once we get on site, we identify that. And in most cases, the machines are functioning very well, and in most cases, they're human error.
So, how would you say voting's gone so far this morning? Along with those issues, you mentioned a fire alarm too.
Well, from a presidential election standpoint, everything's magnified because of volume. Volume creates more issues statistically. At this stage, for the first 3.5, almost 4 hours of voting, I don't think it could have gone any better. When you're dealing with deploying over 1,600 poll workers, 360 precincts, 176 locations, you're going to have some problems, some issues, but we had very minimal issues with getting into locations. We had a couple of situations where our poll workers didn't arrive until 6:20, 6:25, but every report that I received, we had our supplies in the building on time for the opening of the polls, which is a small miracle when you look at the volume and the amount of logistics that go into conducting an election of the magnitude of a presidential in a large county like Montgomery County.